She thought her money could buy anything, even the law. When police stopped her driver for running a red light, she didn't just argue. She laughed, mocked the officer, and when they told her she'd be appearing before Judge Caprio, she smirked and said, "Perfect. I'll show him how this city really works." But the moment she stood before the bench, that confidence turned to arrogance and then to silence. Because when she insulted Judge Caprio to his face, he didn't shout. He didn't even flinch. He simply said one line that made the entire courtroom gasp and reminded everyone watching that money can buy comfort, but never class. Before we show you exactly what happened in that courtroom, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, hit that subscribe button, and ring the bell, because this is one case you'll never forget. The courtroom was full that morning, a steady hum of murmurs echoing through the air until the clerk's gavel tapped the room into silence. Judge Frank Caprio adjusted his glasses, glanced at the docket, and said softly, "Case number 5624, City of Providence versus Ms. Victoria Hensley." From the second her name was called, the atmosphere changed. Heads turned as a tall woman in her mid-40s strutted toward the podium, flanked by her driver, a nervous-looking man in his 50s with trembling hands. Victoria didn't look nervous, she looked annoyed. Her diamond bracelet flashed under the fluorescent lights, and her designer handbag rested perfectly in the crook of her arm, as if even the courtroom were just another inconvenience in her day. Judge Caprio flipped open the file. "Good morning, Ms. Hensley. I see this case involves a moving violation, a near collision involving your vehicle, and several concerning remarks made afterward." Before she could respond, Caprio looked toward the officer standing near the front. "Officer, let's start with your report." Officer Nolan stepped forward, clearing his throat. He was composed, though you could tell this wasn't a simple traffic stop to him. Not after the behavior he had encountered. "Yes, Your Honor," he began. "On the morning of February 18th, I observed a black Mercedes-Benz running a red light at the intersection of Waterman and Benefit Street. The vehicle narrowly missed another car, forcing the driver of that vehicle to swerve into the curb." A low murmur rippled through the courtroom. Caprio's gaze sharpened slightly. "The driver," Nolan continued, "was a Mr. Harold Grant, Ms. Hensley's chauffeur. When I approached, he was fully cooperative, apologized, admitted fault, and was ready to pay the ticket. He was polite, calm, and took responsibility immediately." Caprio nodded. "So far sounds straightforward." The officer exhaled slowly. "It would have been, Your Honor, but that's when Ms. Hensley, who was seated in the back, stepped out of the car." The gallery grew quiet. "She told me," the officer said, reading from his notes, "my driver doesn't pay tickets. Do you have any idea who I am?" Gasps and scattered whispers filled the courtroom. She then proceeded to approach the other vehicle involved, a small sedan, and told the couple inside that if they filed any complaint, she'd make sure they, quote, regretted it financially. The couple appeared frightened. They refused to escalate the matter and left the scene. Judge Caprio raised his brows slightly. "Threats?" "Yes, Your Honor, directly. I documented it. I also noted that when I issued the citation, she laughed and said, and I quote, 'Tickets are for people who can't afford lawyers.'" The courtroom stirred. Even her driver shifted uncomfortably beside her. Caprio closed the file slowly, eyes steady on Victoria. "Is this accurate, Ms. Hensley?" She crossed her arms, giving a dry smile. "Depends who you ask, Judge. I might have said a few things, sure, but people always twist stories when they see someone with money. Jealousy's free, after all." A few people in the gallery muttered under their breath. Caprio didn't react. He simply leaned back slightly. "Officer, is there anything else the court should be aware of?" Nolan nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor. This isn't her first incident. 3 years ago, her vehicle was involved in a pedestrian accident. A young boy. The case was dismissed after a private settlement. Records show the family received compensation, but the original investigation included allegations of interference." The judge's expression darkened ever so slightly. "Noted." Then he turned back to Victoria. "Ms. Hensley, do you understand the seriousness of what's being described here?" She smirked, unfazed. "Judge, I understand one thing. People like to make a big deal out of nothing. My driver knows how to handle the road, and as for that other family, well, maybe they should learn to drive before blaming others. Her driver's shoulders sank. Judge Caprio studied her for a long, quiet moment, the kind of silence that always came before something important. Finally, he said, "I think we've heard enough of the report for now. Let's hear your side next." Victoria tilted her chin upward, eyes cold, lips curved in a faint smile. "Oh, you'll hear it, Judge. But I warn you, I don't play the victim." The gallery was silent. Even Officer Nolan looked uneasy. Caprio nodded slowly. "Neither do I, Ms. Hensley." The tension in the courtroom was almost tangible as Ms. Victoria Hensley straightened her designer jacket and adjusted her pearl earrings. Her confidence wasn't quiet. It filled the entire room like a perfume no one asked for. "All right, Ms. Hensley," Judge Caprio began, his tone even, professional. "You may explain what happened in your own words." Victoria smiled thinly, crossing one leg over the other, as though she were sitting for an interview instead of standing trial. "Well, Your Honor, it's really very simple. My driver made a harmless mistake, and somehow it's turned into this ridiculous spectacle." Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "Harmless mistake?" Caprio repeated. "Running a red light and nearly causing an accident with another vehicle isn't exactly harmless." Victoria shrugged. "Oh, please. Nobody was hurt. And let's be honest, half the people in this city drive worse than that. I see it every day." The gallery stirred, a few shaking their heads. Caprio glanced toward her driver, who stared at the floor, clearly mortified. "Mr. Grant, did you run the light?" The driver cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor. I did. I was distracted for a second. It was my fault, not hers." Victoria immediately cut in. "He's being polite, Judge. I told him not to stop so suddenly. The light changed too fast. See, anyone could have made that mistake." Caprio frowned slightly. "You told him not to stop?" She smiled, unbothered. "Yes, because I know how these traps work. The city loves red light tickets. Easy money, right? I pay more in taxes every year than half this city combined. I practically fund your salary." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Even the stenographer paused for a second, eyes widening. Caprio blinked slowly, his face unreadable. "Excuse me?" Victoria leaned forward, grinning. "Oh, come on, Judge. Don't act surprised. We both know how this works. The city survives on fines, and people like me keep the lights on. So, forgive me if I don't get too emotional over a little ticket." Her words hung in the air, smug, venomous, and dripping with entitlement. The gallery began murmuring again, this time louder. One man whispered, "She really said that?" Caprio raised his hand, restoring order. "Ms. Hensley," he said slowly, "this courtroom is not funded by arrogance. It's funded by accountability. And right now, you're not showing much of it." She smirked. "Accountability? I'm here, aren't I? I could have sent my lawyer, but I thought I'd give everyone the pleasure of my company." A small, awkward laugh escaped from somewhere in the back, but it died quickly when Judge Caprio's gaze shifted that way. He turned back to her, calm as ever. "You seem to find this amusing." Victoria crossed her arms. "Because it is amusing. Honestly, Judge. I've been in real courtrooms, big ones, over serious matters. This is like a community theater version of justice." The air in the room changed instantly. Caprio leaned back, resting his elbows on the bench. "Community theater?" he repeated softly. "Nothing personal," she added quickly, smiling that hollow, insincere smile that made everyone bristle. "I just mean, let's keep this in perspective. It's a ticket, not a trial." The gallery stared at her, some shaking their heads, others whispering under their breath. Caprio stayed quiet for a moment longer, studying her carefully. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes did, the faint glint that appeared whenever he realized this wasn't just another case. This was a lesson waiting to happen. Finally, he spoke, voice calm but edged with quiet authority. "Ms. Hensley, I assure you, justice doesn't depend on how big the courtroom is. It depends on how big the truth is. And from what I'm hearing, yours seems Rather small. A ripple of quiet laughter passed through the room. Her smile faltered for the first time. Now, Caprio continued, flipping the file open again, why don't we move on to the matter of the threats you made to the other driver? Victoria's smirk returned, though thinner this time. Oh, that? Just a misunderstanding. People exaggerate when they're scared. I simply told them that if they wanted to make this a legal issue, they should be ready for legal consequences. That's not a threat. It's advice. Caprio tilted his head slightly. Advice. Interesting choice of word. She flashed her teeth. I'm good with words, Judge. Comes with the territory when you actually succeed in life. The gallery erupted into low murmurs again. The arrogance in her tone was unbearable, and yet, Judge Caprio still hadn't raised his voice once. He simply nodded slowly, closing the file. All right, he said softly. I think I've heard enough for now. The calm in his voice was the kind that made everyone else nervous. Judge Caprio folded his hands and looked at Ms. Hensley for a long, quiet moment, the kind of silence that wasn't meant to intimidate, but to make someone face themselves. Ms. Hensley, he began gently, this report mentions that you approached the other vehicle after the incident and spoke to the occupants directly. Would you care to explain what was said? Victoria smiled, that same cold, unbothered smile that seemed to hide behind every one of her words. Of course, it was nothing dramatic, Your Honor. Just a simple conversation that, apparently, people are too sensitive to handle. Go on, Caprio said softly. Well, she continued, they were overreacting, crying, panicking, claiming my driver almost killed them, which is absurd. I told them to calm down and be reasonable. And yes, I might have said something like, don't make this more expensive for yourselves. The gallery murmured. One man near the back whispered, she what? Judge Caprio didn't move. Expensive? He repeated quietly. She shrugged. You know how these things go. People get in minor incidents and suddenly want to sue for emotional trauma. I was just trying to help them avoid embarrassment, and I was being practical. Her tone was smooth, too smooth. Caprio leaned back slightly. You threatened them with financial consequences if they pursued legal action. Is that what you're saying? Threatened? She said, chuckling lightly. Oh, Judge, you make it sound so ugly. I advised them. I've been through this before. I know how these things spiral. The words hung heavy in the air. Been through this before, Caprio repeated. Are you referring to the 2019 incident involving your vehicle and a pedestrian? The smile on her face faltered, if only for a second. That was a misunderstanding, and it was settled privately, as the records show. Privately, Caprio echoed. Yes, the file mentions a settlement. A young boy, wasn't it? Victoria's jaw tightened. It was years ago. Caprio's eyes never left hers, and according to this report, the boy was 6 years old. You struck him with your car in a residential area. Is that correct? She shifted in her seat. My driver was the one behind the wheel, and I made sure the family was compensated. That's what money is for, isn't it? To solve problems? A wave of shock rippled through the gallery. You could hear someone mutter, unbelievable. Judge Caprio sat still, but his gaze hardened just slightly. A faint crack in his calm demeanor. He spoke slowly, clearly. Money doesn't solve problems, Miss Hensley. It hides them. For a while. Victoria rolled her eyes, laughing under her breath. Oh, please, that family got more than they deserved. Their lawyer was practically begging to settle. If anything, I was generous. The gallery stirred again, louder this time. A woman whispered, she hit a kid. Caprio raised his hand. Order. The room fell silent. He looked back at her. Do you realize what you just said? I realize, she said coolly, that people take advantage of wealthy individuals every day. I'm tired of being treated like a villain just because I'm successful. Caprio's voice remained even, but it carried a new weight, the kind that came when patience started to thin. Success doesn't give you immunity, Ms. Hensley. It gives you responsibility. Something you seem to have confused for privilege. Her smile returned, sharp, forced. Judge, I've been sitting here for 15 minutes listening to lectures. Can we wrap this up? I have real work to get back to. Unlike most people here. The words landed like a slap. Gasps filled the air again. Caprio stayed calm. Too calm. Real work, he repeated softly. I see. And what exactly do you do, Ms. Hensley? I run a real estate company, she said proudly. We manage properties across the East Coast. Hundreds of families live under roofs that I provide. So, forgive me if I don't have time to babysit city employees with traffic obsessions. The judge looked at her for a long moment, then exhaled slowly. You employ people, Ms. Hensley. That should have taught you something about empathy, because right now I'm struggling to find any in your words. Her smile turned smug again. Empathy doesn't pay bills, Judge. Discipline does. It was one of those moments where the air in the courtroom feels electric, everyone sensing what's coming, but no one daring to move. Judge Caprio closed the file slowly. Very well, he said, his tone measured but cold now. You've made your point clear. He turned to the bailiff. Please summon the witness report from the couple in the other car. As the officer stepped away, Victoria leaned back in her chair, whispering just loud enough for the microphone to catch. This is a waste of my time. The gallery stirred again, whispering. Caprio's eyes flicked up, sharp, quiet, final. No, Miss Hensley. Not a waste. A reckoning. The courtroom door closed softly as the bailiff returned, handing Judge Caprio the witness report. He flipped through the pages silently, his expression calm, but the tension in the air said it all. Ms. Hensley, he began slowly, this statement from the other driver says that after your vehicle nearly collided with theirs, you approached their window and said, and I quote, if you say a word about this, I'll make sure you pay for it. Do you deny that? Victoria laughed, not nervously, but mockingly. Honestly, I don't even remember what I said. People love to exaggerate, especially when they realize who they're dealing with. Caprio's gaze didn't shift. And who exactly were they dealing with, Ms. Hensley? She leaned back, brushing invisible lint off her sleeve. Someone who actually matters in this city, unlike them, or this ridiculous little hearing. Gasps rippled through the gallery again. Caprio took off his glasses and set them down on the bench. Ms. Hensley, I'd advise you to think very carefully about what you say next. Victoria smirked. Oh, please, spare me the dramatics, Judge. I've dealt with bigger fish than you. The courtroom went completely still, her driver's face drained of color. Ma'am, he whispered quietly, shaking his head, but she ignored him. Let's not pretend this is some kind of Supreme Court, all right? You handle parking tickets and little local violations. I pay more in taxes than half your city makes in a lifetime. I fund this place. I fund you. The words echoed like a bomb. You could feel every eye in the room turn toward Judge Caprio, waiting. He didn't react immediately. He sat back, breathing slowly through his nose, his expression unreadable. The calm before a storm. Ms. Hensley, he said softly, do you think that money gives you the right to treat people as less than you? She smiled sweetly. No, not less, just different. Some of us are meant to lead, others follow. It's just how the world works. That single line, cold, unapologetic, made the entire courtroom shift in their seats. A man near the back muttered, You've got to be kidding me. Caprio nodded slowly, eyes fixed on her. So let me make sure I understand. You believe your financial status puts you above the law? She shrugged lightly, her tone dripping with mock innocence. Not above it, Judge. Just a little further away from it than most. The gallery stirred again, people shaking their heads, whispering in disbelief. Even Officer Nolan clenched his jaw, visibly restraining his reaction. Caprio, however, remained composed. His voice, when it came, was calm but sharper than before, deliberate and cutting. You know, Ms. Hensley, I've spent over 30 years in this courtroom. I've seen every kind of person, the poor, the broken, the angry, the lost. And I've seen the rich, too. But rarely. He paused, leaning forward slightly. Have I seen someone so proud of being heartless? The words landed like a strike. Victoria froze, her smirk faltering for the first time. I understand arrogance, Caprio continued, but what I see in you isn't arrogance. It's emptiness. Because when a person truly has power, they don't need to remind everyone of it. The gallery fell completely silent. Every word from the judge cut through the air like glass. Victoria's jaw tightened. You're trying to humiliate me, aren't you? Caprio shook his head slowly. No, ma'am, you've done that yourself. That line hit like thunder. Even her driver looked down, covering his face. For a moment, Victoria didn't speak. Then she let out a dry laugh, though her voice trembled ever so slightly. This is absurd. I came here for a ticket, not a therapy session. Can we be done now? Judge Caprio nodded once. We're getting there. But before we are, I want to address something very clear. He picked up the old report, the one involving the boy. You say you've been through this before. You're right, but you didn't go through it. You bought your way out of it. And that's not justice. That's cowardice. The courtroom murmured. Victoria's eyes flashed with anger. You have no idea what that situation was. Caprio's tone hardened. I don't need to. I know how you handled it. The same way you handle everything else. With money and intimidation. She stood up abruptly. You can't talk to me like that. Caprio looked up at her, calm but unshakable. I just did. The audience gasped again, this time with a few quiet chuckles of disbelief. Her voice rose. This whole thing is a joke. I could buy this courtroom if I wanted to. Caprio leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering to a quiet, deadly calm. And yet, here you are, standing in it, powerless. The room went still again. You could hear the faint hum of the lights overhead. For the first time since she walked in, Victoria didn't have an answer. Judge Caprio rested his hands on the bench, his calm voice carrying a weight that made even the air in the room feel still. Ms. Hensley, he began, I wasn't planning to revisit your past today, but since you brought up how you handle things, I think we need to talk about the incident you mentioned earlier, the one involving the young boy. Victoria shifted in her seat, her smirk returning, though her eyes flickered with something faintly defensive. That case is closed, Judge, years ago. It has nothing to do with this. Caprio nodded slowly. You're right. Legally, it's closed. But morally? He tilted his head. That's a different story. He glanced at the file, then looked back at her. According to this report, your car hit a 6-year-old boy named David Johnson on Elmhurst Avenue in 2019. You were a passenger at the time, and your driver lost control. I already said that, she snapped, folding her arms. Yes, Caprio replied softly. But what you didn't mention is that your lawyers paid the family an off-the-record settlement. They didn't press charges because they were told the boy's medical expenses would be fully covered. She smirked faintly. Which they were. So, what's the problem? The gallery murmured again, several people shaking their heads in disbelief. The problem, Caprio said, his voice tightening slightly, is that the payment wasn't about helping them. It was about silencing them. The family was told if they spoke to the media, the settlement would be revoked. Her tone turned sharp. Objection. That's not in the official record. Caprio looked directly at her. No, it's not, because that part was handled through threats and intimidation. The investigator who took the original statement resigned 2 weeks later. The family moved to another state within the month. Convenient, don't you think? Victoria's jaw clenched, her hand gripping the edge of the podium. You have no proof of that. I don't need proof, Caprio said quietly. I have a pattern. Her eyes widened slightly, but he pressed on, his tone calm, deliberate, and merciless. I've seen this kind of behavior before. People who think money is a shield. They break the rules, buy forgiveness, and convince themselves it's all fine, because no one ever tells them no. He paused, leaning slightly forward. Well, Miss Hensley, today, someone's telling you no. The gallery was completely still. Not a whisper, not a breath. Victoria swallowed, trying to regain her composure. You're twisting everything. That family agreed. They were fine with it. Fine? Caprio repeated softly. A 6-year-old boy ended up with permanent injuries. The mother was hospitalized from stress. They weren't fine, they were broken. And you used their desperation as leverage. Her smirk faltered completely now. You don't understand how things work in the real world, Judge. Caprio smiled faintly, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Oh, I understand perfectly. The real world is full of people like you, people who think decency is optional and accountability is negotiable. Victoria's voice rose, almost desperate now. This isn't fair. You're dragging up old stories to make me look bad. I'm here for a ticket. No, Caprio said firmly. You're here because you never learned what consequences feel like. Every time life tried to teach you, you paid your way out. But not this time. The words hit her harder than any raised voice could have. For the first time, Victoria looked smaller. Her chin dipped slightly, her bravado cracking under the weight of something she wasn't used to. Genuine authority. Caprio sighed quietly and leaned back. You know, Ms. Hensley, I often say the law is here to correct, not to destroy. But people like you, he paused, you make it very hard for justice to stay patient. Her voice dropped to a whisper. So, what now? Caprio looked down at the file once more before answering. Now I decide how much of this lesson you'll carry with you after today. The gallery remained silent. Every person could feel it. The shift. This wasn't just about a ticket anymore. This was about a lifetime of arrogance finally meeting its reckoning. For a long moment, Judge Caprio didn't say a word. The courtroom was quiet enough to hear the faint buzz of the lights above. Everyone could feel it, that calm before the inevitable reckoning. Victoria shifted in her seat again, clutching her purse tightly, her face pale now, but her mouth still stubbornly twisted into a smirk she was struggling to keep. Finally, Judge Caprio exhaled and spoke softly. You know, Ms. Hensley, I've been on this bench for decades. I've met every kind of person you can imagine. The angry, the poor, the broken, the arrogant. But you're something else entirely. She tilted her chin upward, forcing a smile. I'll take that as a compliment. It's not, Caprio said, his tone sharp but controlled. The room stilled again. He continued, voice steady but cutting through the silence like a blade. You see, most people who stand here, they're scared. Not because of the fine or the ticket, but because they know they've done something wrong. They feel guilt, regret, a conscience. He leaned forward, eyes fixed on her. But you? You wear your mistakes like jewelry, proud to show them off, certain that money and status make you untouchable. The smirk vanished completely. Caprio's voice lowered, and the weight in it made everyone in the room sit up straighter. You threatened a young couple after almost running them off the road. You bragged about buying silence from a family whose son you hurt. And now you stand here laughing, as if this courtroom, these people, and the law itself are beneath you. Her driver's hands fidgeted nervously at his sides. He looked like he wanted to disappear. Caprio pointed subtly toward him. This man beside you, your driver, had more decency in one moment of honesty than you've shown in your entire testimony. He took responsibility immediately. He apologized. You mocked him for it. Victoria's jaw tightened. I didn't mock him. Caprio cut her off with a single raised hand. Enough. The silence that followed was absolute. He took a deep breath, then continued, his tone softer, but full of quiet power. I was raised to believe that wealth and status don't define a person. Character does. You can have a mansion, a fleet of cars, a bank full of money. But if you've lost your empathy, you've lost everything. Her eyes flickered. For the first time, she looked uncertain, small almost. Ms. Hensley, Caprio said, leaning forward slightly, I don't envy you. I pity you. Because somewhere along the way, you started believing that kindness is weakness, that humility is for the poor. But let me tell you something. Humility is what keeps a soul alive. Arrogance, it eats you from the inside. The gallery was dead silent. Even the bailiff, a man who'd seen hundreds of hearings, stood motionless, eyes locked on the judge. Caprio paused, then added softly, "You could have taken responsibility today. You could have apologized to those people you threatened. You could have proven that all that money didn't erase your humanity. But you didn't. Instead, you mocked, laughed, and reminded everyone just how far you've drifted from what decency looks like." Victoria looked down, her eyes darting across the desk, as if searching for a defense she no longer had. The judge's voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. "I can't give that boy back his childhood. I can't take away the fear you left in that couple. But I can do this. I can make sure, for once in your life, your actions have a consequence you can't buy your way out of." The sound of his gavel striking the bench echoed like thunder. Crack! Her head jerked up, startled. "Miss Hensley," Caprio said firmly, "you will not be jailed, not because you don't deserve it, but because the law does not allow it in this case. But your driver will be fined for the moving violation, as is proper, and you," he pointed slightly toward her, "will pay full damages to the couple involved in this incident." He leaned back, folding his hands. "You will also make an additional contribution, $10,000, to the local children's hospital. Perhaps it will remind you that money can heal more than it hides." The gallery began murmuring again, softly, approvingly. Caprio wasn't finished. "You said earlier that you pay more in taxes than this city makes. Well, consider this another kind of tax, a moral one. Payment due immediately." A ripple of laughter and quiet clapping spread through the room. Victoria sat frozen, her expression unreadable, humiliated, furious, and maybe deep down a little ashamed. Judge Caprio's voice softened as he concluded, "I've seen people with nothing walk into this courtroom and leave with dignity, and I've seen people with everything walk out empty. You've just joined the second group." He lifted his gavel once more. Crack! Case closed. The applause this time was louder, not raucous, but firm, respectful. Even the bailiff gave a subtle nod. Victoria rose slowly, her eyes darting to the floor, her confidence drained away. Her driver looked at her, then at the judge, whispering quietly, "You should listen to him, ma'am." For once, she didn't answer. Judge Caprio let the room settle after the applause died down, the weight of his words still hanging in the air. The tension that had gripped the courtroom moments ago now shifted into something else, quiet awe. He took a deep breath, adjusting his glasses as he spoke. "For the record," he began, his tone calm and judicial once again, "the court finds the following. The defendant, Ms. Victoria Hensley, will pay the citation in full. Her driver, Mr. Grant, will be fined for the moving violation. Furthermore, Ms. Hensley is ordered to pay full damages to the victims of this near collision, as well as a $10,000 contribution to the Providence Children's Hospital." The clerk scribbled quickly, recording every word. Victoria sat stiffly, her once flawless posture faltering. She didn't even reach for her purse. Her face was pale, expression distant. The mask of superiority finally cracked. Judge Caprio continued, "Now, but let me be perfectly clear, Ms. Hensley. If it were within the power of this court to issue a custodial sentence, but to place you behind bars for the intimidation, the disregard, and the repeated lack of remorse you've displayed, I would do it, without hesitation." Her eyes snapped up, wide. "But the law," he went on firmly, "does not provide that penalty in this circumstance. And unlike you, I respect the law, even when it limits what I can do." The line landed like a verdict in itself. He leaned forward, his tone quieter now, but sharper. "So no, you won't go to jail today. But don't mistake that for mercy. You're walking out of here with something far more difficult to live with: accountability." The courtroom murmured in agreement. Her driver, sitting beside her, nodded slowly, relief in his eyes, guilt still on his face. Caprio continued, his words deliberate. "Ms. Hensley, you came here laughing. You mocked this court, the officer, and the very idea that laws apply to you. You thought your money could shield you, but money can't hide what you showed the world today. That all your wealth has bought you everything except grace. She blinked rapidly, trying to keep her composure. For the first time, her voice was soft, almost human. Your Honor, may I speak? Caprio nodded slowly. Go ahead. She swallowed, her words trembling. I didn't realize how I sounded. I just get tired of people assuming the worst about me because of what I have. I didn't mean to insult you or anyone here. Her voice cracked slightly on the last words. Caprio studied her for a moment, not with pity, but with a kind of fatherly patience. Owning your words is a start. I hope you'll keep going from here, because arrogance fades, Ms. Hensley. It always does. But integrity, that lasts. He paused, tapping his pen lightly against the bench. You told this court earlier that you fund this city with your taxes. I'll tell you something, Ms. Hensley. This city doesn't need your money. It needs your decency. The line drew quiet applause from the gallery, a soft, steady clap that spread like a wave through the room. Victoria lowered her gaze, silent. For once, she didn't roll her eyes or argue. Judge Caprio picked up his gavel. Case dismissed, he said firmly, striking it once. Crack! The sound echoed through the courtroom. Final, unshakable. As she stood to leave, her driver looked at her nervously. Thank you, Your Honor, he said quietly. Caprio nodded to him, then looked back at Victoria. And, Ms. Hensley, he said gently, when you walk out that door, think about what you almost lost today. Not your money, but your humanity. She nodded faintly, voice barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. As she walked toward the exit, the gallery parted like a tide. The woman who had walked in with her head high and her arrogance higher now kept her eyes on the ground, the sound of her heels clicking like a slow, reluctant march toward humility. When the door closed behind her, the room exhaled as one. The doors shut softly behind Victoria Hensley, and for the first time since the hearing began, the courtroom felt calm again. The hum of tension that had filled the air from the moment she'd walked in had vanished, replaced by quiet reflection. Judge Caprio leaned back slightly, letting out a slow breath. The file still lay open before him, but he didn't glance at it again. He didn't need to. The real verdict had already been handed down, not just by the law, but by conscience. He looked toward Officer Nolan and nodded. Good work, officer. You handled yourself with professionalism and restraint. I wish more people respected what that uniform stands for. Thank you, Your Honor, Nolan replied quietly. Then Caprio turned to the gallery, a room full of ordinary citizens who had just witnessed something extraordinary. His tone softened, calm but filled with meaning. You know, he said, sometimes people walk into this courtroom thinking justice is a game. They think money, status, or connections can bend it in their favor, but justice has a funny way of humbling those who underestimate it. The gallery nodded in agreement. He went on, his voice lowering slightly. What we saw today wasn't about a ticket. It was about the danger of believing you're untouchable. The law doesn't care who you are. It cares what you do, and it always will. There was a brief silence, one of those rare, powerful pauses that said more than words could. Finally, Caprio gave a small, almost weary smile. All right, folks, let's move on. Next case. The clerk called out the next name, and the ordinary rhythm of the courtroom resumed. But the story of that case would be remembered by everyone there, because on that day, arrogance had walked in laughing and left in silence. Now let me ask you this. Do you think Judge Caprio went too easy on her? Or should people who use money to escape consequences face even harsher penalties? And here's another one. If you were in Judge Caprio's place, what punishment would you have given her? Drop your answers in the comments below. I'd love to know what you think. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss another powerful moment from Judge Caprio's courtroom. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that no one is above the law. And don't go anywhere because your next story is already waiting on screen. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with another brand new case from the heart of Providence.